This is the place for notable Kansans to talk about their lives and lessons learned along the way. This week's guest is Becky Elder. Becky is an educator and advocate for environmental responsibility and sustainability. What exactly does that mean and what does it involve? We'll find out. Also, we'll learn about the work as head of Northfield's School of Liberal Arts, and we'll discover what's behind her family's passion for farming and food. It should be an interesting and enlightening half hour as I go one-on-one with Becky Elder. Hello, I'm Victor Hogstrom, and it's a pleasure to welcome Becky Elder to the program. Becky, I've heard so much about you and your educational endeavors, your farm endeavors, your food endeavors, but I want to begin with you being the president of the Wichita Area Sustainability Initiative. Tell us about that initiative and the road that led you to it.
Well, my life is a story, and so I always explain things in that manner. And the Wichita Area Sustainability Initiative was introduced to me in a tornado. We were at Friends University, where I keep a garden called the Friendship Garden, and I was part of a tour by the County Extension Service. And in the middle of the tour, the tornado sirens went off, and all of a sudden everybody was running for shelter, and I happened to be running with the founder of the Wichita Area Sustainability Initiative, a woman named Andrea Knighton. And I said, "Here, duck in this door." And we went in a door, and we were sitting together for about 30 minutes till the all clear came out, and she convinced me to become president of her initiative. Oh. I was so taken by her mission, and it was certainly simultaneous to mine. But that's where I met the Wichita Area Sustainability Initiative, and I did very rapidly integrate myself into it. It's a very small organization, but it was actually, the mission is childhood trauma. Andrea was a cancer survivor. She used food as her medicine, and in the wake of that great excursion in health for her survival helped her think about food deserts in the city of Wichita and how it could be addressed. And she began to look for people that would help her develop aquaponics systems, and aquaponics is the marriage of fish and plants, and it's a closed system in which the fish are doing what fish do. They're eating, they're pooping, and then they are feeding the plants. And the technology has been advancing, but we actually left technology and development of those systems behind for education. So now we are teaching ecology, and we've developed what I consider to be a really important and even paradigm-shifting educational opportunity in 15 lessons. They're about 45 minutes each.
And teaching this
to high school, middle school, elementary school, anybody. The basis is officially ecological literacy. Can you speak the language of the earth? Do you know how to recognize when the earth is speaking? Can you speak back to the earth?
Tell us, how do you recognize when the earth is speaking?
I think she spoke this morning. I think this late April snow was a message from Earth that we're still subservient. We're still hers. I love the concept of the Earth being anthropomorphic, having those human characteristics and us being able to communicate clearly.
So what kind of feedback do you give to the earth when it speaks to you?
Well, this morning I said, whoa, give me a new coat. I'm not quite ready for this. But I'll tell you, it is a conversation. The only alternative we have if we don't seek conversation with everybody is conflict. And we better get over that. We know that we're challenged, and we do know that developing skills to talk, even translate what one another are saying, are uppermost in our world right now.
So how does this sustainability idea and the initiative apply to Elderslie Farm that you're involved with?
Well, it's really fun because my background is very rural. My grandparents were amongst those German Mennonites who came over with the turkey red wheat on the boat in 1896 and set up in Butler and Inman. And so I always had farming dirt in my path, in my past, and on the love side of me, on my dad's side of me, they kept a cattle operation, a feedlot around Winfield out in Augusta, and so I have it in me, as we all do. You know, we all have had to intersect with our own food source at some point of origin. But then as we came into town, I was forgetful, and then I remember very vividly in high school going out to a friend's farm in Halstead, and I said, she fed me fresh lettuce out of the garden, and I said, I want to do this. I want to do this. I was 18 years old, and I said, I want this back somehow. And she sent me home with a bushel basket full of sheep manure. And I was in my mother's car, which was kind of a nice car. And when I got home and I took the basket out and I took it and put it in Mother's garden, she yelled out the back door, "What's that?" And I said, "Sheep manure." And she said, "In my car?" And I said, "No, in my garden." And I started my first squash plant, and from then it's been a garden all the time. I was a hippie. I was in Arizona State University's maelstrom during the late 60s and the early 70s, and I learned that a t-shirt and cutoffs and sandals was as close as I was going to get to nothing. And I wanted to go as far away as I could and yet remain relevant. I didn't want to escape and I didn't want to hide. I just wanted to be real. And I think all those influences brought me to Wassee.
So you are from Kansas originally.
All together.
All together. But you ended up marrying a man from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
I did. And
how did that happen?
Oh, it was another one of those, it was one of those agrarian moments, I suppose. He was from Chattanooga, and he grew up on a mountaintop. His parents were the inheritors of a rural legacy on top of a nowhere place that at that time was called Raccoon Mountain. It later became the Tennessee Valley Authority, but he grew up all by himself. His mother was 45 years old when he was born, and he was, I won't say that his parents abandoned him, but they were a little older and he was quite lively, and they left him to grow up on his own. They gave him a pony and they gave him about 600 acres, and they said, "Come back when you're 21." And he did, literally. He was an outdoor kind of boy. And when I met him in college, we were on a 10,000 acre domain called the University of the South, Sewanee. So we fell in love kind of sharing a common story. Chattanooga has a very similar ethos to Wichita, and the same kind of folk were there raising crops and being farmers like they were here. So we had that in common, and Chattanooga is it's homegrown.
So when you returned back to Kansas, you helped establish a school.
A school, yes.
And it is not a public school, nor is it like a regular private school. It's totally different. Explain those differences, and how could people afford to attend this?
I'm so glad that you recognize that. I'm not a public school. I'm not a private school. I'm an educational network. I draw from just like nature does, I draw from everything that is alive and will contribute. And the school had its origins as I tell the story, I have to, not just do I love to, but I have to say that my great-grandmother was a prairie poet. She was writing women's articles for women's magazines in Douglas around the Walnut Valley and sending them off to be included and published. And then her son was a product of a one-room schoolhouse. He was the same age his teacher was. They were 17 years old together. And then his son started Wichita Collegiate School in 1959, of which I was the first K through 12 graduate. And collegiate school, for what it is now, you'd never know that we started at that time at 7000 Livonia. It was behind Coleman Junior High School, and it was fields. It was an old building that was full of mice, very, very much like a barn, I might say. So I've been spending most of my time in those kind of places. And the school, Northfield, as it is now, has that ring to it. And it was intentionally named Field, and we were in the north end of Wichita when we started at Love Box Company. That's my family legacy. Love Box was in Wichita by 1920, and they were one of the first. They were one of the first industries there at that I-35 and 235, 135, 235 intersection, along with the Coleman Company. And when it was my turn to raise children, homeschooling had become an option. So we homeschooled for a while because I just wanted to stay home. I wanted to stay in the garden, basically. My husband had purchased a rural property, and I wanted to learn it, and I wanted the children to learn it. And yet I loved that we were marvelously linked with this industrial world as Love Box Company. I got the best of both ends. And the school started in the factory. We sold in 2006. So the company started in 1923. We started as a school in 1993. In 2013, the school had been operative for almost 20 years. We sold the company to a very bright Australian who had conquered the urban forest, and he gave us enough money for our life's work to settle all our debts and start a small school. So
tell us the philosophy of the school.
The what?
The philosophy.
Oh, the philosophy. Well, I like to encapsulate it this way. God authored and finished everything. It's our job to find it out, and we have several tools to do that: observation, consideration, and conversation. And that's the philosophy of all life. You're given something that somebody else has created, and your job is not to mess it up. Your job is to understand it and to give it its life in your time. And I have to say that the last part of Northfield School is of the liberal arts, Northfield School of the Liberal Arts. And the liberal arts are really the pedagogy, pedagogy being the end of teaching, the feet that go with the philosophy. And the liberal arts are basically, you have on yourself your faculty. You have your five senses, which are the way that the world comes into you. You have your brain for considering them, and you have your mouth for talking about them. And so the liberal arts are nothing more than you. Everybody is a liberal arts scholar. I just intend to make it very self-conscious.
So you are then an educator, a housewife, a mother, an environmentalist, and I may say a sustainability-abilitalist.
I like that. We coined a new word, Victor.
We did, yes, we did.
Way to go. Always be original.
So tell us, what concerns do you have then about, farming and food versus education, and how are you imparting those concerns to others?
Elderslie Farm is nothing more than our home. And what it does now is it is entering in, Elderslie Farm is entering into the advocacy for simplicity, for the unencumbered. My son, there were 8 children in that family that grew up on that farm, and 7 of them have done other things. And I would just put it this way. The other 7 have done equally magnificent things in their own way. But one of them, George, came home, and he got out of his truck and he said, "We're going to start the new farm." And I said, "I'm not sure what that means, but knowing you, George, it's going to be an adventure," because he was the kid who we could not ever get to settle down in an education. He was an expedition, not an education. So George took it, and he had a degree in agronomy, history and agronomy from Clemson University. And he came home and he went to work finding out what kind of dirt we had. And then, to make it simple, George turned the dirt into soil. And that soil now supports what Elderslie Farm is, a highly integrated, very clever display of local agrarian opportunities.
So we have a game I like to play with you.
Okay.
But before we do that, I'd like to find out, because you established a school, which is neither private nor public, and you have a philosophy, if you don't have money, come to it, pay what you can, or something like that. You can explain that briefly, but the real question here is, what in your mind is wrong, that you see wrong with the public schools?
Nothing. Okay. Nothing. Great idea. Great ideas always, just like nature, reach their optimal point and then they decline. The second law of entropy is that everything is going from a great idea to a difficult problem. Everything. We have to build back into all our institutions and all our enterprises and all our outreaches this idea that dying's okay. Change is all right. It's not an end, it's a beginning of something new. That's basically my explanation of all things, and it fits perfectly with the public school.
What is that entrance philosophy you have at your school?
Well, if you've been downtown, there's a big building there called the Robert D. Love YMCA, and that was Dad. And I was strapped to him because that's where the swimming pool was, so he had to raise money for the YMCA so they could have a swimming pool so I could swim, so I could not wear everybody out. And the philosophy when he was building that, when he was soliciting the funds to build that first big building was, if you can pay, pay. If you can pay something, pay something. If you can't pay, just come. And I loved, again, the whole concept of gathering together what was around us. The YMCA downtown Wichita in the 1950s was it was a gathering place. It was a beautiful, integrated place.
So let's go to this game. You tell me what your favorite thing is when I ask you about them. A book. The book.
Oh, definitely. The best book in the world is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Favorite song?
It has to be something along the lines of Moonlight Sonata, but really, I was a bebopper. I Want to Be Bobby's Girl was the song on the radio every night when I was 10 years old. And I didn't have a Bobby, but I knew that I did want a stable life.
Television show.
Dick Van Dyke.
Oh. Food.
Always squash. I'm sorry. Just a good old squash will do me.
Your favorite time of day?
Early morning.
Favorite stage of life?
All of them. They've all been great
All
for
of
me.
them?
I'm intergenerational, all in myself.
Okay. What's the meaning of life for you today? Now you're involved in all of these various things throughout your life. What's the meaning of life?
To know what's real. And it's not easy. The truth is a word, truth is a word that people throw around to make their cause sacred. And it's not to be set aside, but it is to be enlivened by a synonym, what is real? Because we have a tendency to overlook or underestimate or at times simply blind ourselves to what is real because we want something different.
Becky, how do you determine what is real?
Start with the earth. Start with what's right in front of you. Start with the day. Start with the air. Start with your ability to interact with all those things and find out if you can continue to do it. If you can't continue to do it, you need to modify, you need to adapt, you need to change. So being real means, in philosophical terms, it means what is. That idea of what is a very important guiding maxim for all of us. And it means the is of poverty, it means the is of affluence, it means the is of the difficulties that come between those two socioeconomic factors clashing. What is? I got to look at it. I got to touch it, feel it, taste it, see it.
At the beginning of this interview, you said you were a hippie.
Oh, yeah.
How did that help you?
Well,
or what difference did it
yeah,
make in your life?
The 60s were all about, and even the 50s were all about, it's too heavy, man. It's too heavy. I can't do this anymore. If I had a hammer, if I had a bell, if I had a song, you know, we aren't talking economics here, we're talking philosophy. And we need to get down to the philosophical basis. They weren't thinking that way. They were thinking, let me get it, you know, let me burn my bra and my draft card. Let me get away from my responsibilities. But properly interpreted, I think in the transitions over time, the hippies were a great revelation for the rest of us. They were looking for something simple. And that was very appealing.
So then what is that philosophy you formulated from those days?
Don't wear more than you have to. Take the closets out of your house. Eat simply. Find a garden. Love the person on the other side of the fence. Be together. Sing. Don't give up on who you are and where you've come from. Take the easiest, most accessible questions and answer them profoundly and communicate them beautifully.
Have you made any mistakes?
Oh, whoa.
What's the key one?
Oh, well, I'll tell you from two directions. Personally, the worst mistake I ever made was, as a girl, I didn't listen to my mother. My mother was just like me, and we had a lot of conflict. My father was much more patient with me, but the worst mistake I made was not listening enough. In my agrarian terms, the worst mistake I made was mowing the field last summer, releasing a horde of grasshoppers on my garden. Yeah, I'm ignorant of so many things I should know, but that's what I'm doing for the rest of my life, finding out.
If you were to write the lead story, the lead of the story of your life, what would that lead read?
The thesis statement, the beginning paragraph. There's some great ones in the history of literature, like these are the best of times, these are the worst of times. The sentence that I would try to, and I do this, it's funny you ask that question, because I have a million titles for the book I'll probably never get written. But the opening sentence will always be, I wanted to know. And I think that is, curiosity is the genius of childhood. And we do everything. I think it was Vincent van Gogh that said the rest of life is trying to extinguish that in children. But I think the idea of curiosity would be linked to knowledge, which would be linked to philosophical pursuits, theological pursuits, and then would end up with that great is that I'm after.
Besides being a teacher and, quote, a farmer, do you consider yourself an environmentalist?
Yes, I want to. I want to be included in that quest. I want to be included in that work.
Why?
Because I think it is the urgent work in front of us, and maybe not because we're going to be apocalyptically eclipsed in the next 4 years, but because I believe the earth conditions our character, and I believe that our character is slipping. I think we have a difficult time understanding what to do, and it's producing a lot of disorientation, and connecting with the earth and beginning that process of discovery again, of remembering the earth and making it part of our lives is a good thing for me to do and to teach others.
Wow.
Wow.
Becky Elder, wife, mother, teacher, environmentalist, farmer, and what else?
Oh, I hope friend.
Friend.
I hope friend.
Thank you so much for joining me one-on-one. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Our email address is oneonone@kpts.org. That's if you have a question or comment. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'll see you soon.